She sat in the Alpha King's seat by mistake. He growled from behind, "Stay right there." Chapter 1. Chloe Davis gripped the strap of her worn backpack, her knuckles white. The air inside Chicago's Union Station was thick with diesel fumes and the impatient energy of travelers, but the anxiety coiled in her chest was entirely her own. She was running, though she preferred the term starting over. After growing up in shelters and 2 decades working shifts at a grimy breakfast spot under the constant harassment of her manager, Gary, her entire world fit into this one bag and a cheap prepaid ticket. Her destination was Seattle, a city of rain, possibility, and her friend Sarah's promise of a couch. The train, the Cascade Express, was her escape route. She found the track number and located the boarding platform. The train itself was a long, silver serpent, promising a 3-day journey across the breadth of the country. Her ticket was for a standard sleeper car, a small, windowless bunk she'd saved months for. As she shuffled down the platform, she held her crumpled ticket, the cheap thermal paper slick with the sweat of her palm. The printing was faded, the seat number hard to read. C12. Or was that A12? In her fatigue and haste, the ink had smudged, blurring the letters. She checked the digital display board above the door of the next car. Parlor and observation, reserved PASSENGRS only. Parlor. That sounded high-end. But the letter on the car's exterior was an AA12. It had to be it. She pushed through the heavy door. The interior hit her senses with a shocking force. It was quiet, unnervingly quiet, like entering a vacuum. The air was rich, no longer smelling of diesel, but of something wild and sophisticated. Old cedar, crisp snow, and dark, compelling musk. The car was an opulent lounge, plush velvet seating, dark oak paneling, and massive panoramic windows. It was nearly empty. She spotted a discreet plaque, A12. Chloe slid into the cushioned seat next to the window. The velvet felt impossibly soft beneath her fingertips. She allowed herself a small, illicit moment of relief. This was nothing like the sticky vinyl she'd wiped down 1,000 times. She deserved this one comfort, this brief reprieve from a life of scraping by. The car remained quiet as the final boarding calls echoed faintly from the station speakers. The other passengers who entered were few and moved with an unsettling, fluid confidence. They wore expensive, tailored clothes and exchanged glances that were too keen, too calculating. They weren't just passengers, they were observers. Then the atmosphere changed again. The subtle cedar scent intensified, becoming heavy, dominating. The hushed conversations around her dropped instantly to absolute silence, as if every person in the car had suddenly ceased breathing. Chloe kept her head down, tracing a pattern on her worn jeans, pretending to be absorbed in a non-existent task. He entered her peripheral vision like a shift in the light. Dark, imposing, and too large for the narrow aisle. Caleb Vance. She only caught fragments of him. Tailored charcoal wool that hid nothing of his powerful build, hands marked with heavy silver rings, not jewelry, but crests, and a sheer, inescapable aura of authority that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up. He didn't walk, he flowed, consuming the space around him. She risked a quick, fatal glance up. His face was a study in sharp, chiseled perfection. High cheekbones, a jaw shadowed with precisely maintained dark stubble, and eyes that were the color of Arctic ice, not blue, but a glacial, almost silver blue that seemed to radiate cold light. He couldn't have been older than 35, but the power that emanated from him made the whole car tremble. 2 men flanked him, taller than average, their suits perfectly cut to hide the bulk beneath. They moved with a predatory stillness, their eyes constantly sweeping the perimeter. They were not guards, they were enforcers. Caleb stopped 1 row behind her. She felt his presence like a dense, physical weight pressing into her back, and the scent of cedar and musk became intoxicating, overwhelming the recycled air. The elderly conductor, who had been briskly checking passes moments earlier, suddenly materialized, hovering with genuine, palpable reverence. Alpha Vance, I apologize for the intrusion. Is there anything required before departure? Alpha, the word resonated in the silent car, confirming everything Chloe had instinctively feared. This was not a business car, this was a territory. Water, still. No ice. Caleb's voice was deep, a low rumble that contained the quiet finality of a predator's snarl. It was a voice that never needed to be raised to be obeyed. Chloe's heart slammed against her ribs. Alpha. She was in the wrong car, in the wrong seat, and she had intruded upon an apex being. Her seat was definitely E12, in the economy car she hadn't even looked at. The one was a smudge, not an A. Panic flooded her chest. She needed to melt into the velvet, disappear, and find a way out before he noticed the human wallpaper in his periphery. The train shuddered, a heavy metallic groan, and began to pull slowly out of the station. She was trapped. Just as she braced herself to stand, to stammer an apology and endure the walk of shame, a smooth, cold voice addressed her from the aisle. "Excuse me, miss." It was not the conductor. It was one of the Alpha's enforcers, his face a granite mask. "Boarding pass, please." Chloe's throat closed. She was caught. Chapter 2. Trembling, Chloe handed over the crumpled ticket. The enforcer, who she now noticed had eyes the color of dark obsidian, scanned the paper, then glanced at her seat number and back at the ticket, a faint crease forming in his forehead. "Miss Davis," the enforcer's voice was low, impersonal. "Your assignment is E12. This is the private parlor car. You are in the Alpha's personal seating section." Chloe's cheeks burned hot. "I am so sorry, it's a mistake. The ink was faded, I misread the. I'll move immediately." The enforcer nodded, already turning to escort her out. But a sound stopped them both, a low, deep, guttural sound that vibrated through the floorboards of the train car and directly into Chloe's bones. It was not a cough or a clearance of the throat. It was a growl. Caleb had risen slowly from his seat behind her. He seemed even taller now, broader, his physical power radiating outward like a pressure wave. His glacial eyes settled on their interaction, cold and intensely focused. "Is there a problem, Kane?" Caleb's voice was measured, but beneath the control, the growl was still audible, a tremor in his vocal cords. The enforcer, Kane, straightened instantly, abandoning Chloe. "No problem, Alpha. This passenger is simply misplaced. Seat E12. Caleb's arctic gaze fixed on Chloe. She felt the impact like a physical strike. His eyes weren't merely assessing her worth. They were calculating her molecular structure. Every detail of her, the anxiety radiating off her, the fear, the faint, lingering scent of cheap diner grease, was being catalogued. She couldn't look away. Something ancient and instinctive within her demanded submission to his gaze, but another rebellious part of her, the part that had fled New York, refused to drop her eyes. "Which seat is hers?" he asked, not breaking eye contact with Chloe. "E12, Alpha. She belongs in the general sleeper section." Caleb's head tilted infinitesimally. He shifted his attention to the bruised skin exposed where her cheap sweater cuff had ridden up her wrist, a faint, ugly yellow-green souvenir left by Gary. His expression didn't change, but the musk and cedar scent surrounding him darkened, turning metallic, like ozone before a storm. "The seat is unoccupied," Caleb stated, nodding toward where Chloe sat. Kane checked his tablet again. "Yes, Alpha, we are not at capacity on this run." Caleb's eyes locked back onto Chloe's, their intensity trapping her breath. She stays. Kane blinked, his obsidian eyes showing a flicker of confusion. Alpha. I said she stays right here. Caleb's voice was still low, but the authority was absolute. Then, directed only at Chloe, a soft, dangerous vibration that only she seemed to hear. Stay right there, don't move. It was a command delivered with the terrifying certainty that the laws of physics and biology would compel her obedience. The enforcer nodded, swallowing whatever question he had. Understood, Alpha. My apologies, Miss Davis. He retreated instantly. Chloe sat frozen, clutching the armrests until her knuckles were white again. Why would the Alpha King of whatever hidden power he commanded insist she remain in a seat she hadn't paid for? She was a disruption, a nobody, a mistake. The train picked up speed, the rhythmic clack of the wheels beginning to lull the car into a routine cadence. She stared out the window at the blurry landscape, acutely aware of the dangerous energy vibrating directly behind her. First time outside your territory. The question startled her. She turned slightly to find Caleb leaning forward, his forearms resting on his knees. He'd shed his heavy jacket, revealing a crisp white shirt stretched across shoulders so broad they seemed unnatural. A golden watch, impossibly heavy, gleamed on his wrist. Is it that obvious? She managed, her voice scratchy. He paused, a tiny predatory curl lifting the corner of his mouth. You smell of flight and fresh territory. He meant the anxiety, the excitement, the fear. She looked down at her hands and slowly relaxed her grip on the luxurious velvet. Yes, first time. Caleb remained leaning in, his arctic gaze dissecting her. Your name, little one. Little one, it was a possessive, territorial term. Every instinct warned her against giving personal information to the Alpha, but refusing him felt like inviting certain, swift consequences. Chloe, she said finally. Chloe Davis. Chloe, he repeated it, the sound resonating in the deep register of his chest. I am Caleb Vance. The train surged as it hit open tracks, accelerating. She instinctively gripped the seat again, her stomach lurching. It gets easier, Caleb said, his voice surprisingly gentle, cutting through the rhythmic pulse of the engine. Just breathe through it. When the train leveled out, she risked another glance back. Caleb was still watching her, an unreadable, ancient hunger flickering in his eyes. Not fear, exactly, but awareness. The awareness of a predator who has just discovered the perfect, untouched scent. Thank you, she said, addressing the immense elephant in the parlor car. For letting me stay. I truly did make an honest mistake. I know you did. His certainty was absolute. How could you possibly know that? He leaned back in his seat, the subtle scent of pine and snow wrapping around her. Those who try to scam their way into an Alpha's private quarters don't smell like fear and fresh, untapped spirit. They smell of greed and pretense. You smell only of survival. A startled, shaky laugh escaped her. Is that how I looked? Like I was about to apologize to the air I was breathing. That, he confirmed, and like you might phase out of your skin and bolt down the aisle at any moment. Chapter 3. A staff member, a polite young man in a pristine uniform, approached with a tray of crystal glasses. Complimentary vintage port for the parlor car. He offered Chloe a glass with visible reluctance, but a quick, sharp look from Caleb kept the man's professionalism firmly in place. As Chloe reached for it, her sweater sleeve rode up again, exposing the yellow-green discoloration on her wrist. Caleb saw it. His eyes didn't widen, but the temperature in the car seemed to drop several degrees. The predatory musk surrounding him intensified, now laced with something akin to cold, controlled fury. Enjoy the port, Chloe. It is an 82 grams single harvest. He said the name casually, without boasting, his gaze still fixed on her wrist. Likely better than whatever they serve in E12. She quickly pulled her sleeve down. It should be, she said inadequately, sipping the rich, dark liquid. It tasted of old wood and sun, nothing like the cheap, saccharine wine she'd used to celebrate her final day at the diner. Seattle, Caleb said, nodding to her ticket. Running to something or away from something. The question hit her too close to the bone. Both, I suppose. He acknowledged this with a low, thoughtful murmur. Sometimes both is the only answer that makes sense. Dinner service began. A silver cart was wheeled in, displaying a feast that belonged in a 5-star restaurant. Seared duck breast with cherry reduction, smoked trout, and elaborate pastries. Recommendation? Caleb asked, nodding her overwhelmed expression. I've never had any of these things, she admitted, shame creeping in. My experience is largely limited to frozen breakfast patties and burnt coffee. A shadow crossed his face, a flicker of displeasure that felt deeply personal. That is unacceptable, he stated. You will have the duck and the dark chocolate torte for dessert. She ordered the meal as instructed. Caleb chose the trout and a deep red wine that made the waiter handle the bottle with reverence. A 2005 Chateauneuf du Pape, Caleb informed her, worth more than a month's rent in most human cities. As they ate, the rich food and wine created a temporary bubble of luxury, making the rest of the world distant. Caleb insisted she try his trout, his movements smooth and practiced as he transferred a piece to her plate. Tell me about your starting line, Chloe. What exactly are you fleeing? She set down her fork, appetite suddenly gone. I told you, a fresh start. And I told you I know more than you think. His eyes dropped pointedly to her concealed wrist. Who was he? The directness of the query broke her resolve. She looked down at her plate. My manager at the diner, Gary, he thought he owned me. The last time I said no, he grabbed my wrist and threatened that I'd never find a job in the state again if I didn't stop being frigid. Caleb's expression hardened. The cold fury returned, palpable and sharp. Did he mark you more than once? He tried. I always fought him off. Gary who? The question was a demand, clipped and fast. What? His full name, the diner's location. Give them to me. A chill ran through her, deeper than the air conditioning. Why? Are you going to call his boss? Men like that do not stop with one woman. Consequences exist for a reason, he stated, his glacial eyes holding hers. Because I asked. She recited the information. Gary Brennan, the Sunrise Grill on Cermak Road. Caleb nodded once. He reached into his pocket, not for a phone, but for a small, dark object carved from polished black wood, a communication device unlike any she'd seen. He placed it to his ear, speaking in a foreign, low dialect that was guttural and urgent. He gave 2 pieces of information, the Sunrise Grill address and the name Gary Brennan. He concluded the call with a single, sharp word, not goodbye but a command. Resolved. He set the device aside and looked back at Chloe. I didn't ask what you did, she whispered. Some questions, Caleb returned, his tone brooking no argument, are safer left unasked. A dark, dangerous satisfaction unfurled in her chest. She had every reason to be terrified of this man, but instead, she felt gratitude. Chapter 4. The server returned with the chocolate torte, drizzling warm ganache over the perfect, spongy cake. Caleb watched Chloe take her first bite, his eyes tracking the movement of the spoon to her lips with an intensity that made the heat rise to her cheeks. Good, he asked, his voice low, dropping an octave. She could only nod, unable to speak around the rich, complex flavor. A small, involuntary sound of pleasure escaped her. Caleb's eyes darkened in response. You should experience pleasure more often, Chloe Davis. It suits your spirit. The air between them became charged, humming with something raw and elemental. She forced herself to finish the dessert, intensely aware of his patient focus. What is your work, Alex? She asked, desperate to steer the conversation away from the precipice of desire. For an alpha to have such resources and security. I am an overseer, he explained, a genuine smile transforming his face from merely handsome to devastating. My family has interests in territory management across North America and Europe. We primarily handle resource logistics, protection, and interclan negotiation. That sounds vague, she said, still processing the word clan. It is deliberately so. Are you always this, mysterious, or am I special? As soon as the words left her mouth, she regretted them. Too bold, too flirtatious, too dangerous. But Caleb's smile deepened. You are special, Chloe, more than you know. One of his enforcers approached, bending to whisper in Caleb's ear. Caleb's expression instantly shifted, the predatory amusement replaced by cold calculation. He dismissed the man with a slight, curt gesture. I apologize, Caleb said, rising with fluid grace. Business requires my attention in the private meeting car for a short time. Please feel free to rest. We have a long journey to the West Coast. He looked at her, and his eyes softened marginally. You looked like you needed it. As the cabin lights dimmed, signaling the quiet hours, Chloe tried to read, but her concentration was ruined. She was aware of Caleb's absence like a missing beat in a rhythm. She must have fallen asleep, lulled by the steady vibration of the luxury train. When she woke, the car was plunged into comfortable darkness. A heavy wool blanket covered her, one she didn't recall requesting. She shifted and turned slowly. Caleb was back in his seat, the subtle blue glow of a sleek, proprietary tablet illuminating the sharp planes of his face. He looked up instantly, as if he'd felt her consciousness stirring. Sleep well, he asked, his voice a low, intimate murmur. Like the dead, she admitted, surprised by how rested she felt. I didn't order this. She lifted the edge of the blanket. One corner of his mouth lifted. I did. You were shivering. 3 hours of unguarded vulnerability in the presence of an apex predator. She should have felt exposed. Instead, she felt oddly safe, as if the weight of vigilance had been temporarily carried by his immense power. I seem to be thanking you a lot, Alex. You are not used to people doing things for you, are you, Chloe Davis? No, she admitted, not really. It is because you do not expect it. You've trained yourself not to, he noted, his insight too accurate, too penetrating. He leaned forward, closing the distance, his eyes unblinking. What if I told you that I saw you the moment you stepped into this car, that I watched you try to make yourself small, to apologize for the space you occupy, that I recognized in you something I've been searching for without knowing it? I'd say that sounds like a line, she whispered. A very good one, but still a line. He laughed, a rich, genuine sound of delight. Fair enough, but what if it's true? Chapter 5. Then I'd say you're either insane or dangerous, Chloe admitted. Possibly both. And yet, Caleb countered softly, you are still here talking to me instead of feigning sleep. He had her. She couldn't explain the draw, the intoxicating pull toward his dangerous presence. Maybe I'm the one who's insane, she said. The soft lights of the parlor car brightened slightly, signaling the change in journey status. Your mind is too loud, Caleb said, setting his tablet aside. I can practically hear you thinking. You don't know anything about me. I know more than you think. He held up his tablet, and on the screen was a snapshot of her old life. Not a social media profile, but records. Employment history, a blurry security photo from the diner, a transcript of community college courses in accounting before she had to drop out. What the hell? She hissed, anger momentarily overwhelming fear. You looked me up while I was sleeping. You invaded my privacy. He didn't seem the least bit apologetic. I make it a point to know the terrain I am entering, especially when something unforeseen walks into my private car. We're not terrain. You're a stranger. I'm allowing caution, Chloe, not disrespect. Be careful. I do not permit both. The implied threat, delivered with absolute, casual confidence, was like a bucket of icy water. I apologize, she said stiffly, aware of the isolation of their position, hurtling across the dark plains in a luxurious metal box, surrounded by his enforcers. I'm not accustomed to having my privacy invaded quite so thoroughly. He nodded, accepting the apology without offering one of his own. Tell me about Seattle, he said, the abrupt shift in subject jarring. You're meeting a friend, Sarah. My friend Sarah. We grew up in the same shelter system for a while. She moved out west, got settled. She offered me her futon until I could find a place and a kitchen job near the waterfront. A waitress, he said flatly. It's honest work. I'm good at it. I'm sure you are. But is that all you want, Chloe? To spend your life carrying other people's plates and smiling for tips? The question stung, because she had asked it of herself 1,000 times. What I want doesn't matter much. What matters is paying rent and keeping the lights on. What if I told you? Caleb murmured, leaning forward so close she could smell the intense cedar and the fresh mint on his breath. That your desires are the only thing that matters now. She looked away, out the window, at the shadows cast by the passing trees. You don't make offers like this to every woman you meet on a train, Alpha Vance. He inclined his head. I've never made this offer to anyone. This isn't a habit, Chloe. This isn't a game. The rhythmic sway of the train, the warm wine, and the immense pull of his proximity melted her resistance. I want to kiss you, Caleb stated, the words cutting through the air like a knife. May I? The formality of the request, coming from a man who had already overridden her life plan, was both disarming and intoxicating. Instead of speaking, she leaned forward, closing the final distance. His lips met hers with surprising, focused gentleness. It was soft and questioning at first, then intensified with an urgent hunger that rooted her to the spot. His hands came up, not touching her body, but cupping her face, his thumbs tracing her jawline. The kiss felt less like a greeting and more like a claim, a transfer of awareness. When they finally broke apart, she was breathless. Caleb's eyes were dark, his pupils dilated as he stared at her. You continue to surprise me, Chloe Davis. Is that good or bad? Very good. Predictable is boring, and you are the scent of a new beginning. He settled back into his seat, his gaze still holding hers. I was 14 when my father brought me to the States, he began, his voice taking on a distant, gravelly quality. I spoke little English. The other young pups mocked my accent. I learned quickly to make myself small to attract less attention. The revelation stunned her. This man who embodied authority had once felt like she did. What changed? My father saw what was happening. He took me aside and said something I've never forgotten. You are a Vance. You bow your head to no one. You are the Alpha's blood, be seen. Caleb's eyes, full of ancestral power, found hers in the dim light. The same applies to you now, Chloe. Whatever protection my name provides is yours. Whatever resources I have are at your disposal. You need never make yourself small again. Chapter 6. The train conductor's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their imminent arrival in Seattle. The magical bubble of the parlor car instantly broke. "We begin our final descent into Seattle," Caleb said, his face resuming its carefully composed mask of neutrality. "The journey ends, and the choice begins." She handed him the well-worn copy of The Great Gatsby she'd been pretending to read. "Thank you for the loan." "Keep it," he said, pressing it back into her hand. "A souvenir, something to remember me by." "As if I could forget you." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur. "What happens when we reach the station?" "That depends on you, Chloe." "On me? How?" "When the train unloads, you have a choice to make. You can go to the main concourse, contact your friend Sarah, and start your life as a waitress by the waterfront." He paused, his glacial gaze never leaving hers. "Or you can come with me." Her heart stuttered. "Come with you where?" "To my home. Does it matter?" It should have been the only thing that mattered. Instead, she found herself considering walking away from her safe, predictable path for a man who radiated secrets and danger. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I know enough," he countered, his certainty absolute. "The rest we have time to discover." The train ground to a halt at the massive Seattle station. Reality came rushing back. Her small bag, Sarah waiting, the sensible future. "I can't just." "You can. That is the beauty of this, Chloe. You can do exactly what you want. For once in your life, you have a genuine choice." The passengers around them began gathering their possessions. Caleb remained seated, waiting for her response. "Why me?" she finally asked. "Out of all the people you could choose, why me?" "Because when I looked at you," he said, the intensity in his eyes blazing, "I saw someone who deserves more than she's been given. Someone who survived without becoming hard. That," he finished, "is rarer than you might think." The seatbelt sign dinged off. Around them, passengers began to disembark. Caleb stood, and one of his enforcers immediately appeared, handing him his jacket. He slipped it on with the fluid grace of a hunter. He extracted a thick black card from his inner pocket, not paper, but a composite material, embossed with only his name and a number. CALEBVANCE. No title, no company. "My private contact," he said, holding it out to her. "Available to you regardless of your decision today." She slipped the card into her jeans pocket. "I'll wait for you at the private access exit near the baggage services." He paused, looking down at her. 20 minutes. After that, I will assume you have chosen your destiny." He was gone. Chloe made her way off the train in a daze, following signs toward the main concourse. Every step toward the waiting world was heavy with indecision. Sarah represented security. Caleb represented a terrifying, exhilarating path. She pulled out her phone, 3 missed calls from Sarah. She found herself opening the text app, scanning her friends' excited messages about the couch and the job. Minimum wage plus tips, just like New York. Different city, same life. Was that really what I wanted? To trade one invisible existence for another? She stood near the confluence of the tracks, travelers flowing around her. She looked at the departure board. 15 minutes left. She pulled up Sarah's number, but instead of calling, she typed a quick text. Something came up. "I'm safe. I'll call you tomorrow." It was a coward's move, but she couldn't bear to see Sarah's face when she abandoned her for a man she'd just met. She turned and hurried back through the concourse, retracing her steps toward the exclusive, private side of the station. She reached the designated exit, and there he was. Caleb stood apart, his men positioned strategically. He was on his black communication device, his expression serious. When his eyes lifted, they scanned the crowd with supernatural speed and intensity. When he saw her, his entire body language shifted. surprise, relief, and deep, profound satisfaction. She stopped before him, her cheap duffel bag heavy on her shoulder. "You're here," he said simply. "I am. And your friend. I told her I'd call tomorrow." Caleb nodded. "Are you certain, Chloe? This isn't a decision you can unmake once you step across this threshold." "I'm not certain of anything," she admitted, "except that I'd regret walking away." His hand extended toward her, a simple gesture laden with fate. She hesitated only a moment before placing her palm against his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, strong, and instantly, irrevocably possessive. "Come," he said. "The car is waiting." Chapter 7. Caleb led her out into the cool Seattle night. A sleek, black SUV with heavily tinted glass idled at the curb. The air was crisp, carrying the unfamiliar salt scent of the Puget Sound. "Mr. Vance," the driver acknowledged, opening the rear door. Caleb guided her into the back seat, his hand resting securely at the small of her back. His enforcers followed in an identical vehicle behind them. "Where are we going?" she asked as the car pulled away from the curb. "My home," Caleb replied, "unless you would prefer a hotel for tonight." "Your home is fine." He studied her in the dim interior light. "You're nervous." "Wouldn't you be? I just appended my entire life plan to go home with an alpha king." A short, genuine laugh escaped him. "You don't waste time, do you? You cut straight to the truth." "We're past dancing around things, I think. My family manages the resources of the North Pacific Pac. Some of our interests are conventional, some maintain older traditions and codes of honor." "Alpha King," Chloe clarified. "That means you're in charge of a territory, and the men who travel with you are not just guards." "Associates, enforcers," he corrected smoothly. "And yes, my territory extends from the Cascade Mountains to the coastline. This is my domain." "And what happens if I refuse your protection?" "You would be vulnerable," Caleb said, his voice flat. "Our world is complex. Rivals, hunters, and those who mistake you for a stray. You are safer as a declared member of my immediate circle." "Is this the part where you tell me all the rules?" she asked, her gaze steady. "What I can and cannot do as your, whatever I am to you." Caleb's gaze intensified. "You are not a possession, Chloe. I don't want to control you. I want to give you opportunities you've never had. I want you to thrive." "In exchange for what?" His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining. "Your company, your perspective, your trust. Eventually." The car turned off the highway and climbed a winding, wooded road into the hills overlooking the water. It passed through an imposing gate that slid silently open at their approach. At the end of the long drive stood a sprawling, modern mansion of glass and stone, perched above the twinkling lights of the Sound. "This is," Chloe trailed off, unable to find the words. "Ours," Caleb corrected, "for as long as you choose to stay." The car stopped. Caleb raised a hand to stop the driver. "One more thing, Chloe. My world is dangerous. If you stay, you accept that risk and the protection that comes with it." "I understand," she whispered. He searched her face. "You can still change your mind. One word, and the driver will take you anywhere in the city." She thought of Gary's threat, Sarah's cramped apartment, and the promise of endless invisibility. "I want to stay." Triumph flashed, quickly masked in his eyes. He opened the car door and helped her out. A moment later, a woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun appeared in the doorway. Her expression betrayed no surprise at Chloe Quotes' arrival, only calm efficiency. "Good evening, Alpha Vance," she said, stepping aside. "Alina, this is Chloe Davis. She will be staying with us. Please prepare the solstice suite." Eleanor's dark, sharp eyes took Chloe's measure instantly. Of course, Alpha. I've had Miss Davis's bag taken up, and a light supper will be served shortly. Thing, Chloe corrected automatically, gesturing to her small duffel bag being carried away. Just the one bag. A flicker of something, pity or surprise, crossed Eleanor-S face before her professional mask returned. Caleb took Chloe-S hand and led her up a sweeping staircase. They stopped at a set of double doors. The Solstice Suite was an apartment within the mansion, with a sitting room, a small dining area, and a bedroom that featured a wall of windows overlooking the vast, dark water. "This is crazy," Chloe whispered, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the luxury. Caleb moved closer. "It is a lot to take in, I understand that." "Do you? How could you possibly understand what this is like for me?" "No," he admitted finally. "I cannot fully understand your experience, but I can try to make the transition comfortable. I don't even know what I'm supposed to call you." "Caleb," he said simply. "Just Caleb, and there are no rules, Chloe. No expectations beyond basic courtesy. You are my guest." He moved toward the door. Panic flared. "Wait, will I see you in the morning?" "If you wish." "I do." A warmth softened his eyes. "Then I will have breakfast served on the upper terrace at 9. Eleanor will show you the way." He hesitated, closed the distance, and pressed a kiss to her forehead, a gesture of ownership and tenderness. "Sleep well, Chloe Davis," he murmured against her skin. "Tomorrow begins a new life for you." Chapter 8. Chloe woke to sunlight streaming through the Solstice Suite windows, momentarily disoriented by the immense space. The walls of glass offered a panoramic view of the Puget Sound, serene and vast. A discreet knock preceded Eleanor-S entrance. The head of staff carried a steaming cup and a heavy, designer garment bag. "Good morning, Miss Davis. Coffee and some options for your morning wear. Alpha Vance suggested these would be more comfortable for the terrace." "Thank you, but I have clothes," Chloe said, gesturing to the pathetic duffel bag. Eleanor-S expression was neutral. "Of course, Alpha Vance merely believes the morning temperatures require something more suitable." She laid the bag down. "Breakfast will be at 9. The bathroom is fully stocked. I will return at 8:45 to escort you." Alone, Chloe zipped open the garment bag. Inside were casual, high-end clothes, dark denim, a soft silk blouse, and a flowing blue tunic set. All exactly her size, tags still attached. How had he known her size? It was more than a guess. It was precise, supernatural knowledge. A reminder that his resources extended far beyond human wealth. She showered, wrapping herself in a plush robe. She chose the blue linen tunic. It fit perfectly, the expensive fabric feeling like a second skin. Eleanor returned precisely on time and led her to the upper terrace. Caleb was already there, gazing out over the water, his back to them. He wore dark, simple outdoor gear, making him look less like a CEO and more like a high-end primal tracker. He turned, his eyes sweeping over her with unconcealed appreciation. "You look rested." "Like the dead," she admitted. "Did you sleep well?" "I rarely require a full human cycle," he said, pulling out her chair. "But yes, I am well." Breakfast was an intimidating spread. Fresh-caught salmon, berries, eggs, and pastries. "In my world," Chloe said, filling her plate modestly, "breakfast is usually instant coffee and a questionable bagel." Caleb frowned. "That is not sustenance. That is merely warding off collapse." "Thank you for the clothes," she said after a sip of dark, strong coffee. "But how did you know my size so precisely?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I have a good eye for such things. It is a useful talent in my line of work, especially when tracking. He let the word hang, then smoothly finished. Inventory. The deliberate double entendre made her laugh, easing the tension. You have questions, Caleb said finally, setting down his cup. Ask them. Your business, you called it territory management. I saw the men, the way they move. The word alpha. Are you involved in organized crime? His expression turned serious. My organization is older than human governments. We are shapeshifters. My bloodline governs the largest pack territory on the West Coast. The protection I spoke of is protection of our resources and our lineage. Chloe didn't flinch. She had suspected it. Werewolves. Wolves, yes, and much more. You have stumbled into a world you were never meant to see. And the man from the diner, Gary Brennan, what was resolved? Caleb didn't hesitate. Gary Brennan no longer works in Chicago. He has chosen to pursue opportunities elsewhere, quite far elsewhere, and he will no longer be able to use his hands for his chosen profession for several months. You had him hurt, she stated, not a question. I removed a persistent threat to a territory I have claimed interest in. He was a danger to others and a danger to you. He deserved consequences. The casual acknowledgement of supernatural violence should have horrified her. Instead, a wave of cold relief washed over her. Gary would never hurt anyone else. Thank you, she said, the sincerity surprising her. A man in a tactical suit approached the terrace. Alpha Vance, he said, his voice low. The San Diego sector is reporting a discrepancy in the transfer of blood ledger files. It requires your attention. Caleb's warmth vanished instantly. He gave a curt nod, and the man retreated. I apologize, Caleb said, rising from the table. Business requires my attention. Feel free to explore the grounds. Alina can show you the library. I should return by dinner. Just like that, he shifted from attentive host to the Alpha King with pressing matters elsewhere. Your work is important, she said, trying to mask her disappointment. He paused, studying her face. He leaned down and pressed a quick, firm kiss to her cheek. I'll make it up to you. He strode away, already speaking into his device. Chloe sat alone at the massive table, a human girl in an alpha's lair, watching the sparkling blue water, feeling the weight of the new world settle around her. Chapter 9. Left alone, Chloe eventually made her way back to her suite. She found her phone charging beside the bed. Someone had plugged it in. 17 missed calls from Sarah and a barrage of frantic texts. She dialed her friend, her heart pounding. Hello, Sarah's voice was wary. Sarah, it's me. It's Chloe. Chloe, oh my God, where are you? Are you safe? I waited at the station for hours. I called police. What happened? Did you get kidnapped? I'm fine, Sarah. Better than fine. I met someone. You met someone on the train and just went home with them. Chloe, please tell me you didn't go home with some rich pervert who promised you things. Do you know what kind of setup this sounds like? It's not like that, Sarah. He's a businessman. He's offering me a chance to go back to school. He's an Alpha King. A long, painful silence followed. You mean a cult leader, Chloe? You mean you've joined a cult or a crime syndicate? He's giving me an opportunity I couldn't turn down. I know how it sounds, but I'm safe. I'm sorry for leaving you. The waitressing job and the pull-out couch weren't glamorous enough, Sarah stated, her voice cool and wounded. You wanted the fairy tale. Just be careful what you wish for, Chloe. Not all princes are charming, and some castles are really prisons. Before Chloe could respond, Sarah hung up. Chloe spent the afternoon exploring the estate with Alina. The mansion was vast, featuring a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a full gymnasium, and an indoor spring-fed pool. Throughout the tour, Chloe noticed the security measures. Concealed cameras, staff members who looked more like warriors than housekeepers, and reinforced doors leading to Caleb's private offices. "I've taken the liberty of arranging your enrollment," Caleb said casually, later that evening during their intimate dinner in the small dining room. "Classes begin next month at the University of Washington, Business Administration. I noticed that was your original focus." Chloe stopped cutting her salmon. "You what?" He looked genuinely confused by her sudden stiffness. "I thought you would be pleased. You mentioned wanting to finish your degree." "On the train, yes. But that doesn't mean you get to make those decisions for me without asking, Caleb. You've overstepped. Significantly." Understanding dawned in his Arctic eyes. He put down his fork. "You're right. I apologize. I'm accustomed to efficiency, seeing a need and immediately addressing it. People are not problems to be solved." "I appreciate the intention, truly. But I need to feel like I'm building my own life, not having one constructed for me." "A fair distinction," he acknowledged. "I will cancel the enrollment. You may handle it yourself or choose a different program. I will try to be more mindful." His willingness to admit fault surprised her, yet again. "And if I decided to leave?" Chloe asked, the question hanging between them. "Whether this gilded cage has a door that opens from the inside." Anger flashed across his face, quickly controlled. "This is not a cage, Chloe. You are free to leave anytime. I would provide you with substantial resources to establish yourself comfortably elsewhere, ensure your security, and wish you well. Just like that, no consequences. The only consequence would be the opportunities lost for both of us." His voice was steady, convincing. The tension between them eased. After dinner, Caleb suggested a walk in the gardens. The cool night air, scented with cedar and the distant salt of the Sound, was a welcome relief. "I want to kiss you again, Chloe," he said, turning to her under the moonlight. "May I?" She didn't answer with words. She leaned toward him and their lips met. The kiss was deeper, more assured this time, a conversation without language, an acknowledgement of the choice she had made. "You continue to surprise me," he murmured against her skin. Chapter 10. They stayed in the garden for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. He told her more about his family, the weight of their power, the isolation of his position, and how he needed to maintain a facade of ruthless control for the sake of the territory. "I have to leave town for a few days," Caleb said as they reached the door of her suite. "Business in Vancouver. It requires my personal attention to ratify a treaty." Disappointment, sharp and sudden, washed over her. "When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning, early." He gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "The house, the staff, and the security detail are all at your disposal. This is a grace period, Chloe. Time for you to consider your decision without my overwhelming presence influencing you." "How long will you be gone?" 3 days, 4 at most." His hand cupped her cheek. "Will you be here when I return?" The question carried immense weight. It was an alpha asking for confirmation of the claim, a mate seeking reassurance. "Yes," she said, the certainty blooming in her chest. "I'll be here." Relief, profound and genuine, flickered in his Arctic eyes. "Good." He leaned down, pressing a final, tender kiss to her forehead. "Sleep well, Chloe Davis." As he turned to go, she caught his hand. "Caleb." He looked back, one eyebrow raised in question. "Thank you for seeing me when I thought I was invisible." Something profound, recognition, belonging, understanding, moved behind his eyes. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you for allowing yourself to be seen." After he left, Chloe stood in the doorway, watching his retreating figure until he disappeared down the corridor. In the span of 48 hours, Her life had transformed completely, from a struggling human to the claimed presence in an Alpha King's domain. She didn't know what the future held, only that she was facing challenges and dangers that surpassed anything Gary Brennan could have threatened. There would be cultural gaps, power dynamics, and shadows from his world that might try to engulf them both. But for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen and valued, not for what she could do, but for who she was beneath the armor. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. As she prepared for bed, she looked at her reflection in the full-length mirror. She was still Chloe Davis, but she was a new version. Cheeks flushed, eyes bright with something that looked remarkably like hope. She slipped beneath the silk sheets. Whatever complications, dangers, or joys awaited, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was exactly where she wanted to be. Epilogue. Few months later. The wind was sharp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and salt off the Olympic mountains. Chloe stood on the upper terrace, overlooking the sound. She was no longer wearing the blue linen tunic. Today, she wore a tailored, soft leather jacket, a gift from Caleb, and the knowledge that she belonged. The last 6 months had been a dizzying blend of luxury and education. The university enrollment had been managed precisely to her liking, and she was excelling in her business courses. She was learning to navigate the protocols of Caleb's world, understanding which questions were safe and which were not. She had learned to recognize his enforcers. Cain, in particular, had become a distant, watchful acquaintance, and the subtle signs of territorial anxiety. She was no longer invisible. She was the consort, a title that was never spoken aloud by the staff, but was assumed in every detail, from the way Alina deferred to her to the immediate attention of the security detail. Sarah had eventually thawed, though the relationship remained strained. "You're living in a Bond villain's lair, Chloe. Just promise me you have an escape plan," she'd messaged last week. Chloe knew the escape plan was Caleb's standing promise of financial independence, but she didn't want to use it. She heard the heavy crunch of gravel from the drive below, followed by the familiar, powerful scent of cedar and musk. Caleb was back from his last negotiation, a trip to the Yellowstone territories. She turned as he emerged onto the terrace. He was still in his formal gear, the dark charcoal suit and the unyielding authority. But when his eyes, the color of ancient glacier ice, found hers, the mask cracked. "Chloe," he breathed. He crossed the distance between them in 2 powerful strides. His hands cupped her face, the familiar silver ring cold against her cheek. This time, there was no request for permission. His lips met hers with a desperate, all-consuming hunger. It was a kiss that communicated the stress of his world and the relief of returning to his anchor. When he finally pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers, breathing deeply. He was scenting her, claiming her, checking her well-being. "The treaty is ratified," he murmured. "The Eastern wolves are contained, and you—" He pulled back just enough to look at her, a fierce satisfaction in his eyes. "You are thriving." "I am," she confirmed. "The classes are challenging. Alina is teaching me the history of the territorial houses, and I just finished reading The Great Gatsby again." Caleb smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still stole her breath. "And what did you think of the ending, now that you view it from this vantage point?" "I think," Chloe said, reaching up to touch the faint, silvery scar near his jawline, "that Gatsby was naive. He didn't understand the difference between new money and true power. He thought he could buy his way in. But the true Alpha King doesn't need to buy his seat." Caleb's eyes darkened, the pleasure evident. "And what does he do?" "He simply takes it," Chloe finished. "And he takes what he wants." Caleb captured her hand and raised it to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "And what do you want, Chloe Davis?" She looked out over the vast, glittering expanse of the Puget Sound, no longer a refugee or an invisible waitress, but a woman standing on the edge of a new empire. "I want to stay right here," she said, her voice steady and sure. "I want to stay, and I want to be seen." Caleb nodded, his claim absolute. He slipped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. The scent of pine and musk wrapped around her like a blanket of belonging. The choice was made. The journey had ended, but their story was just beginning. Chloe chose the danger over the familiar. She chose to be seen by the Alpha King, leaving her old life and her friend Sarah behind at the station. Don't be the friend she forgets. Hit subscribe and join the pack now before you miss the next coming stories.